A former member of parliament and a prominent lawyer are issuing their report today on claims that prisoners in China are being executed so their organs can be harvested. One-time Alberta MP David Kilgour and human rights lawyer David Meatus have been investigating the allegations on behalf of the Falun Gong movement. The spiritual group is banned in China. Here is Mr. Meatus. Let's listen in.
Well, it's a coalition investigating allegations of persecution, coalition to investigate the persecution of Falun Gong in China, which is based in Washington, D.C. We were asked to do this a couple months ago, and we have now done our investigation, and we're producing this report. This report is available in hard copy here. It's also available online. You can get it at the internet. The site address is investigation.redirectme.net. For the purpose of our investigation, what we did is we tried to basically look at every avenue of proof or disproof we could find. We were not paid. We were doing this as volunteers, and we're not associated officially with anyone. We're just acting independently from everyone and doing this investigation. We pursued every investigative trail we could find. In the report, you will see that there are 18 different avenues of proof and disproof we considered and evaluated. Our bottom line conclusion, after considering everything as best we could, was that the allegations are true. We believe them to be true, that this harvesting is indeed happening. That conclusion comes not from any one of these different 18 categories of evidence that we looked at, but by assessing everything altogether. Altogether, they paint a whole picture. All the evidence we looked at either corroborated the allegations or, in some cases, where we were looking at possible disproof, did not disprove the allegations. Some of the evidence is very compelling indeed, and David Kilgour will talk to you about it in a minute. But let me just run through the basic questions, what the allegation is and what we found. We found that this is happening in the period since the persecution of Falun Gong began from 2000 to the current day. We found that it's happening throughout China, not just in one location. We have a map where we have identified places where there's actual admissions through investigator phone calls, and that map is in the report, and you can see that the map shows locations throughout China. The numbers, of course, this is an estimate because China does not publish these statistics, but we estimate that in the period between 2000 and 2005, there are 41,500 transplants which have no other explained source. And how we arrive at that figure you can see through the report, but that's our estimate of the numbers. Why it's happening, of course, this is not an announced policy, so we're left to, in that area, we can't come to any firm conclusions, but one thing we can say for sure is that this is an area where there's a lot of money to be made. That's one factor, and this is also a group that is extremely depersonalized, vilified, and marginalized. The allegation and our findings are shocking. I mean, to us, this is a form of evil we have yet to see on this planet. This is a new form of evil. Yet in a Chinese context, it may not seem as surprising as it does elsewhere, because we do know for a fact that there's large-scale executions in China. We do know for a fact that executed prisoners have their organs harvested unwilling, without their consent. We do know for a fact that the Falun Gong are depersonalized, dehumanized, and marginalized, repressed, persecuted, both in word and in deed, in the most vile ways possible. For this sort of allegation to be true in Canada would involve a very large step from where we are. But in China, it's not that big a step from where China has been. Now, I'm going to let David Kilgour talk a bit about the evidence, and then we'll open it up to questions. Thank you.
I agree with every word you've said, David. The two Davids here. But I'll speak about some of the witnesses I met with, ladies and gentlemen. and I refer you particularly in the report, those of you who have it, to the back, Appendix 13 and 14. I realize a lot of people don't have it, so I'll deal with 13 first, which is the interview with the wife of the surgeon, who's now outside of China, and she told us a lot of things, as you'll see in the Appendix 13. But the most disturbing thing, in my view, was the fact that her husband confessed to taking the corneas out of the eyes of approximately 2,000 Falun Gong practitioners. You'll see in her comments that that nobody gave their corneas without giving their life as well, because at this particular hospital, or hospitals where he operated, they took the corneas, the heart, the pancreas, I believe, and the kidneys, of course, and the liver. So I think David and I would agree that was one of the most disturbing pieces of evidence we heard, but we had a great deal more. Now, I refer you to Appendix 14, where people say, well, you didn't get into China, how do you know? In fact, we did get into China through some very clever Mandarin-speaking, in some cases a Canadian and some an American. What they did was they phoned hospitals pretending to ask for Falun Gong organs, and you'll see in Appendix 14 what they heard. I'll just give you a couple. This is the Mission City Detention Center, 8th of June. It's not exactly a long time ago. The question by the person calling, and I hasten to say that we've corroborated that the people who recorded these conversations and how they did them and when they did them, and their translations were attested as being accurate by a certified translator. So here's one conversation which is fairly typical. Questioner: do you have Falun Gong organ suppliers? Mr. Lee. This is the Mission City Detention Center. Mr. Lee: we used to have, yes. What about now? Mr. Lee: yes. Further down: how many Falun Gong suppliers under the age of 40 do you have? Mr. Lee: answer: quite a few. Are they male or female? Lee: male. And he goes on, having about 5 or 6 of them available now. It's about as surreal as it's possible to get. Here's the Shanghai's, the Zhongshan Hospital Organ Transplant Clinic, 16th of March. The questioner: how long do you have to wait for an organ transplant surgery? Doctor: about a week after you come. Then there's more discussion. I think all of it, or most of it, inculpatory. Further down at another center, it's just the question is asked, where did you get the prisoners from, Mr. Liu, in the center? From prisons. And it was from healthy Hong Kong practitioners? Liu: correct. We would choose the good ones because we assure the quality in our operation. You mean to choose the organs yourself? Liu: correct. You'll see in the report that we talked, actually David wasn't able to be there. I talked to 3 people living in Canada, one in Montreal, one in Toronto, and one in Vancouver. I'll only refer to the lady from Vancouver who told us that she was beaten so badly that doctors told her that her organs were not working well. Then she told us she overheard a conversation where the doctor said she was going to die. This caused the people from the 610 office, which some of you know and some of you don't, to leave her, basically, and she managed to get well enough that she was able to leave the hospital and ultimately to come to Canada as a refugee. So I guess that's I know it's a long report, but if you'll take the trouble to read it, I think that all of you will come away from what we've said with the same view that we have, is that it is simply inescapable that this is going on. It's going on a large scale, and that it's something that, as you'll see in our recommendations, we think Canada should do its utmost to make sure stops immediately, if not sooner. Shall we open it to questions?
Before we go to questions, I just want to remind everybody that
Well, we're going to leave this news conference now held by former MP, the former Secretary of State for the Asia Pacific, David 킬고어 and 킬고어와, who's an international human rights lawyer. They have released a 45-page report today on harvesting organs from healthy Falun Gong prisoners in China. Now, they say this investigation took place approximately 2 months ago. They did it on a voluntary basis. It probably is worth noting that they interviewed Chinese residents by phone through Mandarin-speaking people who would call and ask questions on their behalf. They received the phone numbers of those people from Falun Gong supporters in North America, but they say that the organs are apparently destined for anyone who can pay for the operation, including Chinese citizens with money as well as foreigners. There are some websites aimed specifically at foreigners, encouraging them to go to China for a transplant. Now, the Chinese government confirms 40,000 plus organs have been transplanted that did not come from executed prisoners. The government, however, says that they come from legitimate post-mortem donors, but 킬고어 says that the live organ donation is still happening. He says he has had phone calls made as recently as 6 weeks ago to a hospital asking if they have Falun Gong practitioners available and receiving confirmation that they do. They are calling for the harvesting of organs from unwilling patients to immediately cease, and they are asking that China investigate organ theft as a crime against humanity.